This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Tom Murphy is with us now. Tom, what were your thoughts? I'm sure you've watched it. Maybe you were watching live on Monday night. What went through your mind when all that occurred?
I was actually watching live on Monday night and saw the play, and it was a semi-violent tackle. I mean, T. Higgins certainly, initiated some. He was part of the deal. But I looked down, I looked away, and then till I heard him saying it, and then of course they showed the replays. But I think on Tuesday I talked to you guys about how I don't know the technical term, the medical term, commodio cordis or something like that. But when you take a shot right to your chest, it messes with the electrical impulses in your heart. It can stop your heart. I mean, it's happened on baseballs. It's happened with hockey pucks hitting people in the chest, and certainly it's happened. And I read a story yesterday about a guy who died on the field way back when. Dick Butkus was a player. Well, he didn't die. They took him off the field, and they finished that game. Yeah. And he died at the hospital.
That's our Red River Dodge Morning Rush Daily Question. Red River Dodge in Heber Springs, Arkansas's #1 Ram dealer. Log on at redriverdodge.com. So what should the NFL do next? I mean, how do you deal with this, particularly if you have more games missed this week, Tom? How do you deal with the integrity of the playoffs moving forward in the seeding, and where everyone accepts that what we're going to do moving forward with wild card games and eventually divisional and championship games in a Super Bowl is all legit this year? Because at the end that's the job of the commissioners to uphold the integrity of everything involving the league on and off the field.
Well, right, and I have not heard further that they're contemplating not playing this weekend. But if they do, I mean, I guess whatever the results are will hold for the playoffs, because you can't. I did hear people talking about there was one open weekend, the weekend of the NFL skills competition or something, and I didn't realize that was the case, that they might be able to fit in just the Bills-Bengals game, but that's starting to look like it's not likely. So I don't know. It's a scenario we haven't faced before, and the teams, I think, will have to be understanding, and there probably would be a team or two that would either benefit from not having a couple games, or that would really benefit from that taking place.
So, Tom, let's talk about the NFL playoffs, some of the teams you like, the players that you think could come out of the woodworks. What does it look like to you now as we get closer to postseason NFL?
Tell you what it looks like for me. If the Falcons had just hung on and beaten, let's just say the Chargers game at home, they had a game against the Commanders on the road where they're inside the 2 or 3 with just a minute left in the game and throw a pick. If we hang on to 2 or 3 of those, we're winning the division instead of the Buccaneers. But that's just sour grapes. Yeah. I'll be a Chiefs fan for the playoffs, since I've adopted them kind of as the local team. But I don't know. I like the idea that there's a little bit of fresh blood. The Rams didn't make it. Looks like the Packers might squeak in after a horrendous start. Why not the Cowboys? Maybe they could be peaking at the right time this year. It's been a long time since they've done that, but I wouldn't mind seeing them do that. And it looks like the Bengals are back, and the Bills are a real quality team. So I don't know. I like the diversity. The Giants are back in the playoffs for the first time in a while. So I like seeing some new blood cycle through.
Tom, I know your primary beat is Razorback football. The news announced yesterday that Marcus Woodson is going to be the co-defensive coordinator. I was kind of taken aback by it. Did you have kind of sources indicate that this was going to happen?
No, a little surprised by that. When we wrote on the hiring a few days ago, and just kind of assumed he'd be defensive backs coach since Travis Williams was already on board. But perhaps it was the title and the accompanying raise that was the deciding piece for Marcus Woodson, because Florida State seems to be in in good shape, on the rise. So I think the idea of getting back in the SEC, working with his buddy Travis Williams, who they were together 2 years at Auburn, and kind of creating their own defensive style was a lure to him. They're going to have to come up with some ways. I mean, they've got to get, better. They've got to recruit well, and they've got to get guys on the back end who break up passes at the last minute. And they've got to get, the pass rush was good this year. School record 42 sacks, but they have to disrupt the timing of more plays because teams that were trailing or, teams that had to pass the ball got back in games and just tore Arkansas up. I mean, you think about the second half BYU, Kansas in the second half just passed all over the field, and I know there were guys missing in that game, but, other games, Arkansas was last in the country in passing yards allowed. So it's a weird dynamic. Top 5 in sacks and last in passing yards allowed. So they got to improve there, and I think Travis Williams and Marcus Woodson are going to be players, coaches, and perhaps they can get this team motivated and find a scheme that will help them improve on that side of the ball.
Tom, a lot of internet scuttlebutt about Kendall Browse and Mississippi State. Is there anything to this, or is this just internet fodder?
Well, no. I mean, I think there's interest there, and the guy who reported, Stephen Robertson, is really plugged in over there. I thought it was interesting that it came from, basically the coach's perspective. Oh, he'll have complete latitude. It'll be his offense and all that. I don't know. I've talked to some folks around Arkansas who think they just don't think it's going to happen. But, Kendall Browse, I would say, deserves a raise. I mean, you look at his side of the ball the last few years, he's been paid less than Barry Odom, and they've kind of performed better. I talked on Tuesday with you guys about the red zone offense. Everyone has their frustrations because it wasn't just a 1 or 2 time thing. It happened in multiple games. But the overall numbers, K.J. Jefferson's completions and their efficiency in the passing game, and their rushing numbers. I mean, they were 7th in the country last year. I can't remember what they are this year, but it's real high up there. And I think they're 16th nationally in total offense. And when you do that in the SEC, it doesn't matter. You're a good offense. You do that in the SEC, you know what you're doing. And I'd like to see Arkansas retain Kendall Browse.
So on the subject of offensive coordinators, Tom, Bobby Petrino getting hired by Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. I know I was very surprised to see Chris Lowe's report. How is that going to work in year one, in your opinion?
Well, we have a strong-minded person in Jimbo Fisher who has his way. And quite honestly, Arkansas had a good chance against those guys. And I'm talking about with Jimbo Fisher at the controls. They just didn't seem to be a particularly explosive offense. Arkansas should have won the last 2 games against those guys. With Bobby Petrino, how much latitude does he have to call everything? Will there be clashes? I saw somebody post a funny thing yesterday that was A&M could turn into one of the more explosive offense in the country, and the thing could spectacularly backfire because you have 2 strong-minded guys who know a lot of football and have been a part of a lot of winning football. So, but if they manage to find a way for it to work and Petrino's schemes to come in, I mean, we saw what Missouri State did against Arkansas. They got the ball on those crossing routes almost at will. That's another one of the teams that passed all over Arkansas. South Carolina did too. But it could work out where A&M is a much more explosive offense, and they had a great defense last year.
Yeah, my read on this to kind of second level is Ross Bjork's kind of an insurance policy here too. That if you have to do something with Jimbo Fisher mid-year or at some point with games left on the schedule, you at least have someone that's competent to step in and run the program should Jimbo Fisher and A&M part ways. To me, Tom, this is an insurance policy as well for Ross Bjork. I don't think that was the intent, but that's one of the secondary benefits.
Wow, that's a good point. And of course, poor Barry Odom, he hires a well-known, nationally well-regarded play caller in Bobby Petrino, and less than a month later, he's gone to the greener pastures and green financially pastures of the SEC. And you're right. I mean, I didn't think about it from that perspective, but it would be kind of like when Danny Ford was on board here. Transition smoothly right into Danny Ford.
This same thing happened to Bobby Petrino when he arrived. Ellis Johnson was his defensive coordinator for like 12 days, and then he left to go to South Carolina, and that's how Willie Robinson got here. So I mean, this is not like this has never happened before. And Petrino was on the other side of it that Barry Odom's living with today when he arrived at Arkansas.
Well, that is true, and I want to say Ellis was there close to 3 weeks, and I had talked to him a couple times, and I had covered Ellis Johnson as defensive coordinator at Alabama. And, in fact, here's a fun fact. The first SEC game I covered was up here, and it was the 42-6 game. It was the worst beating Alabama had ever taken. And Ellis Johnson, to his credit, we talked to him after the game, and it was raining, and we stood under this gazebo down in the south end of the stadium, and Ellis Johnson stood out in the rain and answered the questions about 42-6. So, it does happen in the business, and I'm sure Barry Odom will find himself a competent offensive coordinator, but the Bobby Petrino legend lives on. It's going to be wild to have him back in the league, and will Jimbo Fisher be looking over his shoulder? Will be maybe something to keep our eye on.
Tom, we'll talk next week. More football and basketball. We'll see what the Razorbacks do against Auburn on Saturday night.
BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from the NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. We're the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV. BetOnline, where the game starts.